C++ compiler. It's kind of, there are certain circumstances where like the output is different, but you can not currently. Like the only reason I would use Ruby is IOS because it's kind of woven.
We'll just plug your laptop straight in.
Yeah, I might just need to
Java. Yeah, I wasn't really a fan. Like, I did like the idea that you could just like download the runtime and then it would work on anything, but like unfortunately, not to mention technically, yeah. The only problem is like, well, that giant freaking security thing that they had a few years back. Yeah. What was that? I don't know. I haven't like I looked at the language at the time and like I was deciding which language I was going to learn. Like, okay, security. Not touching that. Not touching that. Java. So actually doing words. Oh, JavaScript and Java, two different things. JavaScript is it's a language unlike any other. I'll put it that way. But the thing we're talking about right now is Java. Java is server-side based. It's how do I say it? Help me out here. Yeah, it runs in its own runtime kind of thing. You can run it anywhere, server-side, client-side, anything else. It's kind of like, yeah, well now that Node.js is a thing.
With Node.js you can run it server-side. Node.js.
Node.js.
Straight up JavaScript is generally low on the site in the browser, but Node.js is only
Yeah. It is pretty cool. Not only that, it's event-driven, which is pretty awesome as well. Node.js is event-driven,
Oh yeah?
which
I didn't
is...
I just use it for
Yeah. Everyone uses it. This guy does. NPM. Just use NPM for everything.
Copy paste.
I use it with, for me, it's all about automating. Yeah, so I use Grunt called Gulp. I use Gulp. It's easier. Hey? Angular.
Really?
It is, but I'm going to say there are things that potentially Ember with the direction that it's going. The only problem that they have right now is the overhead. Like it's pretty huge in terms of mobile things, but yeah, you wouldn't want to use it for mobile stuff, but yeah, it's too slow. But it is getting quite interesting in terms of the direction they're going, how much they're managing to
Interesting conversation. Evaluation methodology exists.
Yeah, some of the adjectives they have.
What was that?
You're sending data in a sensor, you sensor to a web server, and or variations there, all that language.
Live sensor data.
So it's obviously real time.
Basically, the more little links to other things in a site that you put, I'm going to do a talk on this.
Well, we've got to say JavaScript,
Sorry?
just because of Ajax. It's already, like, you've already got the stuff in place there to send
Possibly,
it
I've not
live.
downloaded you very much.
I was thinking of either that or C#.
C# would be better if you wanted to
Well, do you want to come forward
Like,
a bit? We've
depending
got a
on-
bit of a smaller crowd than I was expecting, so let's get cozy.
We can't sing Kumbaya, but when you blokes stand a bit. Concentrate. Borrow my reading glasses.
Well on my way.
Me? My 18 over. You know, life is
Alright, welcome. Tonight we've got Natalie Collins. Natalie is from Media Access Australia. She's going to be talking about web accessibility. So, welcome, Natalie. Just a few housekeeping things. For those of you who have been here before, the male bathrooms are just behind you over here, and females are around the other side near the kitchen. Wi-Fi is available. There's a few signs around to let you know the username and password, so feel free to use it. I'll just hand straight over to Natalie to get started. There's a lot less people than we were expecting, so dig into the drinks and make sure you eat lots of pizza when it arrives. We don't want any leftovers. Thanks, Nat.
Now, web accessibility can be a bit of a dry subject, so maybe that's what turned people off, but I can assure you it can be quite innovative and exciting. I was speaking to Constantine and Alex before, and I think Constantine said, oh, it'd be nice, good to know a little bit about Media Access Australia, and I won't just bore you with all of the details, but Media Access Australia is a not-for-profit organisation, and we work as a catalyst for change, whatever that means. But basically, what it is that we have a vision or a philosophy of achieving media accessibility. So our heritage has been in captioning for television. So about 10 years ago, we were actually known as the Australian Caption Centre, and we used to caption for network television, so Channel 9, Channel 10, Channel 7 and the ABC. A bit of work for SBS, and we were also a not-for-profit organisation back then, but we also did a little bit of advocacy on the side. So back in the late 80s and 90s, when we were trying to build the level of captioning on television and cinema, on DVD, we were also advocating to government around increasing levels of access and captioning on those media. At the time, what actually occurred is that the ABC put out their captioning tender to a public tender, and our organisation didn't get that work, and that was about 25% of our work. And what the board decided to do was then actually say, right, well, what's our real objective? Okay, it's to increase the levels of media access in Australia, and so what the board decided to do was actually sell the business to a subsidiary of the BBC called Red Bee, and what the sale meant is that we could actually exist in our own right without any funding to, I guess, improve and increase awareness about media access in Australia. So that's what we've been doing for about the last 10 years. We've, over that time, extended our remit to not just media access, so cinema and DVD and television, but obviously with the burgeoning internet age and World Wide Web, and the ever-increasing occurrence of audiovisual material on the internet, we've extended our remit to digital accessibility, so to websites and putting information and content online. Today we employ 15 people, and we are not just about advocating for media and digital accessibility in government or industry and with consumer organisations, but we also do provide training and consultancy services to those organisations as well. And we provide it for a fee, but all the money goes back into our advocacy work. So that's just a little bit about us. And I should also point out, we also have a website which is called Access IQ. So when I joined Media Access Australia about 4 years ago, which is when I noticed that we weren't doing a lot in the digital and web space. So what I set about doing was setting up Access IQ and providing free information and resources to web professionals developing websites and mobile websites or and applications for people to use. And Access IQ contains a whole bunch of information and resources on how to make those things accessible. So get going into my presentation. So it's around web accessibility, and it's everyone's responsibility. So something happening here. I wanted it to work in presenter mode, and now it's not working in presenter mode. Anyway, this here. So digital engagement and inclusion. So it's an extension of, I guess, social inclusion, which people might have heard about, but it's basically around the fact that everyone should have the potential to interact with the economy and society. We were talking just before around the right that seems to exist in Australia, if not the world these days, where having access to the internet it can be seen as a human right. So just giving the example that you actually can't find a job or look for a job these days without using the internet. So it seems that for job seeking, for communicating with family and friends, for buying goods and services and groceries, it is an essential tool for doing those kinds of things. So an extension of digital engagement is digital accessibility. And it's around creating online experiences that are accessible to people of all abilities and ages. And I guess what we will see over the next, if we haven't already started to see it, but over the next couple of years, is that social changes in our society will make digital accessibility a necessity. And I've got some slides that explain that. So what are the common, I guess, aspects of accessibility, and what are we really looking at here? And I guess from a disability perspective, there is vision loss, so low vision, or people who are blind, colourblind, or want to work in an eyes-free environment. It's about hearing impairment, so people, accommodating people who are deaf, places where it's perhaps noisy to work, or you might be on public transport and it's hard to hear as well, so noisy environments. Mobility issues, so accommodating people with arthritis or other mobility type issues, and cognitive issues. So we did a straw poll in our office, I think a little while back, and we realised that there were sort of almost, I think it was about 40% of people who either had dyslexia or had family members with dyslexia. So there's a really high prevalence of dyslexia in society that is either diagnosed or undiagnosed. So this is Bruce, and this is one of my favourite quotes. We came to know Bruce through some promotional work that we were doing for Access IQ, and I've got a video with his story, but this quote really struck a chord with me, where he said that prior to losing his vision, he used to use the internet for a few things, but post vision loss, he actually uses it for everything. So we have at our organisation, but also other colleagues of mine who are blind, they are much more proficient users of an iPhone than I will ever be, because an iPhone is accessible. It's got things like voiceover, the ability to use gestures, and a whole range of accessibility features that are built into it that they use for everything, for all of their interactions on a phone. Now I'm going to just skip across to my video.
Sound.
It's not working.
Well, they had subtitles.
Sorry?
If they had subtitles.
Well, it does. It does. I need to turn those on. Here. Is Jess around? Jess, is that It's on mute. Sorry. Me. It's me, I'm on mute.
Sorry guys, we had sound before. It's actually pretty
Good
good.
example of
Accessibility.
Accessible.
Uh,
You can move it online if you like. It's alright.
Oh, see, now it's playing.
So you probably have to choose the output. Yeah.
I should also highlight, I'm not a technical person. Don't developer. I guess that.
Accuracy of a micron.
Alright, there we go.
Next up. I was a teacher of fitting and machining at TAFE, teaching students how to measure down to an accuracy of a micron. The next day I couldn't count fingers. I had the mini stroke at the back of the eyes, and where the eyeball joins the optic nerve, and it left me with less vision.
I was 11 in primary school and did a test and was shocked to discover that I was actually moderately deaf. It was just awful. There was no support for me in the classroom.
The condition that I have, it's called Stargardt's disease. It's basically a degenerative condition resulting in macular degeneration. My parents noticed that I wasn't seeing properly when I was about 6 years old. Then it just slowly deteriorates into your adult years.
Pre-vision loss, I used to use the internet for a lot of reasons. Post-vision loss, I use it for everything.
The benefits of the internet are quite real and profound. The wealth of information, the wealth of opportunity, whether it's for work or entertainment or socialising, all these things are important. The more opportunity that we have to work together on accessibility so we can all enjoy the benefits, just has great potential.
Problem currently is that there is just so much web content out there that's not accessible.
So, some of you may or may not be aware of the fact that Coles Online have been, there's some legal action that's been taken against them recently around the inaccessibility of their online shopping website. And I guess the interesting thing about this particular case is that it's a high-profile case. The last high-profile case was around the year 2000 with SOCOG and with a blind gentleman who was unable to order any tickets to the Olympics online, and their website was inaccessible. And he won that case, but because they were able to determine that there was no unjustifiable hardship to SOCOG around not making their website accessible to people who were vision impaired or blind, and SOCOG just didn't want to spend the money or didn't want to make their website accessible at the time. The interesting thing with this case is that the lady Giselle Mesnage, she's been working with Coles, and I should actually ask, is there anyone from Coles here? Is there anyone from Fairfax? Yeah, no? Okay. Oh, there is? Yeah. So, so with Coles, so Giselle Mesnage has been working with Coles over the last 5 years around the inaccessibility of their website, and has been helping them along the way to make their website accessible. And every time, or there's been a few occasions where they've done a major update to their website, and something has gone wrong from an accessibility standpoint. So she would then contact them and say, look, I can't actually submit an online order, and continuously work with them to help them. The latest issue is that Giselle can create an order. It takes her about 8 hours to create a shopping list and go through and select the products that she wants, put them into a checkout, or the checkout area, or the cart, I should say, and check it out. The thing that she is unable to do is select a delivery time. So what beggars belief to me is that Coles will allow that simple issue to get to a point where it is actually going to go to court, and not try and do everything within their power to fix that issue. So what they have to actually, from a legal perspective, what they actually have to prove is that there is unjustifiable hardship on Coles for them to win this case. So in my view, in my personal perspective, is that it's an unwinnable case, because how can Coles prove that they have unjustifiable hardship with making their delivery time widget mechanism accessible to a blind user? The thing with this also is that this lady isn't going to go away. She has she has backing from funding litigators who are using this case as a part of their corporate social responsibility, or they're providing pro bono legal assistance to her case in order to see this through. So it's not like Coles are hoping that this issue will go away quickly. She's actually got significant legal backing and funding for that legal backing as well. So this may not be the last, or there may actually be many more cases against large online retailers and sites around accessibility issues where people are trying to access online. There's a few others that have appeared in the media recently. There was one recently relating to Westpac and accessibility with their app, and the former Disability Discrimination Commissioner, Graham Innes, who is legally blind himself, he actually took to Twitter to inform Westpac about their accessibility issue, and the issue got remediated before it got to a point of any kind of legal action. So a part of our work, and we're not trying to scare all these organisations, we're actually really sincerely wanting to work with organisations about making websites accessible. But one of the things that we do is we provide legal advice to, we don't provide legal advice, but we provide expert advice to people working in the legal industry around website accessibility. And the main vehicle for complaints is through the Australian Human Rights Commission, and there are complaints made against websites all the time, and they don't hit the media because they get conciliated through that process. So there are lots of very large organisations, from financial institutions to online airlines, national airline carriers, to retail websites that where there is a complaint made against a product or a service of theirs, and it is being conciliated, but the outcome of those is made confidential because of the legal process. So in this particular instance, Fairfax have reported on this issue and provided information about the Coles case. And one of the things that actually came up in some of their own comments was some people here, I don't know if you can actually read it, but what it's saying is that they're delighted that the case has gone forward, highlights the needs of the disabled and the benefits for them getting online. However, vision is not the only disability, and hearing loss is also just as important. And this first comment is saying that they were disappointed because on the Fairfax article there was no captions provided for their video. And then the second comment underneath is a different person or gentleman saying, well, yeah, isn't it ironic because Sydney Morning Herald website doesn't have one page that's accessible or meets the accessibility guidelines. You know, they report on accessibility issues, but they use inaccessible media themselves. So, you know, whilst you know, they were reporting on an accessibility issue, it's kind of ironic that the website isn't accessible, but they are working on it. So I was just going to also very quickly show you what it is like to run through for a screen reader to run through a website. Now I've got my file here. So I've taken
Send it right out. Yeah. I think you know, like your input.
There's only the headphones or the. You should be able to. Yeah, just really.
If you go into control panel into sound and select, see it's got Panasonic, is that correct? With the correct
It must be
output?
that's a projector, isn't it?
I'm going to rerouting encryption system. Awesome movie. Angelina Jolie.
Oh, look, I might not worry about it actually. Essentially what I was going to show you is a screen reader running through a website, and
it's pretty terrible.
Yeah, look, and you know, it's got one of those synthetic voices, so it, you know, it sounds like hell. I mean, yeah. For a lot.
Swap it onto my computer at the end and show you.
Yeah, look, you know.
Are there free screen readers that you can actually test them?
There is, yeah. So there's a free screen reader called NVDA, non-visual It only works on Windows machines though, so.
But VoiceOver is built into OS X, which is, you know, free. if you
Built
have
into
the
that.
Mac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's very easy to turn it on. So, yeah. So there's, and if you're using Android, I think there's TalkBack that's built in. as well.
Chrome extensions as well for it.
Sorry.
Chrome extensions as well. They make that handy too.
Yeah, so there's lots of free tools out there. I mean, I think it's the case that there's about 65. There's about 65% of people who are blind that will use JAWS, and JAWS is a screen reader that you have to pay for. And traditionally people use that for word processing, but more and more Australians are using the NVDA because it works really well with websites and surfing the web via a desktop machine. It's not.
No, go away. Get out of here. Oh, you're tripping us. It's horrible.
This is where you just turn on the internal speakers up all the way.
Could do.
And we'll all be very quiet.
So probably wouldn't be that bad.
Right. Okay, let's do that.
So I might,
Can you maybe do it in Jeopardy dance?
I could do a Jeopardy dance if I have one of those pear ciders or apple ciders. Oh yeah, absolutely. We can arrange
Bring
that.
it
There's a
on.
couple over there.
I can do a
What am I
tree
doing
and
wrong?
like solid.
I'll continue with
We'll put it on this one later.
Do it on the internal speakers, and we'll
Just try that. Set it. Try that. Try that. Is that wrong?
I thought it would work.
Oh, you thought it would work.
Did you have to go and have a go?
I had a go. No.
Is your one up all the way? Let me just unplug that. And turn yours up all the way.
So this is
Yeah.
Angelina Jolie in Hackers.
Yeah.
There was a very nice fight.
No, really?
Is it good?
It's so good.
I know,
It's
right?
good. It's good fun. It's just ridiculous.
Should I put it on my list?
It's like hacking. It's like
Type right for what?
using
Actions or interpret dance? Because both.
Sound.
Typing hacking.
Exactly.
Alright.
Yeah, well, there's a new movie coming out.
But
with,
both of that.
crap, what's his name? It's the guy who plays Thor.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's an actual proper hacker this time. There's none of that.
Okay.
Bullshit.
Using command line, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why I come to meetups. There's no way I would have heard this shit if I was there.
Button. Visited link list with 6 item link things to do. Visited link building and planning. Link environment.
So the screen reader's a bit lost. Sorry.
Nilambit shy count.
It's attempting navigate. I don't know if you can
Larger
see,
text
it's
link.
actually
Smaller text
trying to
link.
scroll through the website.
Remove images list. Edit blank. Button. W dot.
No, the
List
button.
with 6 items living in Nilambit list. Things to do link. Building and environment link. Business link. Your council link. Out of list home visited link. List with 4 items building link. Planning link. Planning for our future link. Permit forms and advice sheets visited link.
So it's trying to find this particular form. It's a tree removal or something like that.
Out of list heading level 2 I want to.
No idea where it is.
Home visited link. Nilambit Shire Council permit forms and advice sheets link. Pane half checked selected submenu busy expanded pressed collapsed protected required. Nilambit Shire Council permit. Pane collapsed selected submenu half checked expanded protected pressed busy required. List make a payment link make a payment edit blank.
Yes. Sounds like a Dalek spazzing out or something.
D R E E space R E
So
M
we know
O
that it's a
V
search
A
box, but
L.
the screen reader didn't know that.
Nilambit Shire Council permit forms and
Jesus.
Nillenwickshire. Out of list permit forms and button.
So the search button's unnamed, so it doesn't know what it's called itself.
Nillenwickshire Council permit forms and list with 9 out of list heading level 1 permit for select reset to clear previous searches.
So
Nillenwickshire Council permit forms and button. Planning application for tree removal / pruning fast track procedure link. Document.
Documents. Yes.
So a person, a screen reader user, so a person who's blind who uses a screen reader, they will be listening to that possibly about 20 times quicker than what we were listening to it. So they listen to it really, really quickly, and they can, they are obviously trained or have the ability to listen to things really, really quickly. So they listen to it in high speed. So us spending a couple of minutes navigating through that page, they will most likely do it in 20, 30 seconds. There's also other tools that they or other shortcuts that they use in their software. So that's using NVDA, and that will present all the links to them. So if all the links, for example, are read more, like the tree removal form, read more, community events, read more, your council, read more. So under each of the news items, that's what they'll pull out. So I'll talk about that in my presentation a little bit further. But so making meaningful links and things like that are really important. But they're also really important if you're just an average user. So, so what I tend to do is actually navigate a site via the headings or via the links itself, and I just tab through them so I'm actually not a mouse user. So so it makes good sense to actually create a website accessibly in the first instance. Now, I'm just going to my presentation. Where I was. So, today we've been, talking about, web accessibility, and I guess, these days I really use use digital accessibility is really the way of describing the issue. So here's sort of like how we make the differentiation. So web accessibility is, of course, it's website focused, whereas digital accessibility includes all digital communication. It includes apps and native apps, content, marketing, documents. Web accessibility is WCAG 2 focused, so I don't know if you're aware of WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the 3C standard. So digital accessibility takes into consideration WCAG, PDF UA, which is around the accessibility of PDFs, mobile accessibility, ATAG, which is Authoring Tool, the Authoring Tool Accessibility Guidelines, UAG, which is User Agent Accessibility Guidelines, Universal Design, and other broader user testing as well. Web accessibility around web content, like I said before, digital is more about all different kinds of digital content and communications. There's some distinctions between teams, processes, and at the bottom, happy customers, and in the digital space, it's more about having engaged customers. Very quickly, so there's really two requirements in Australia for making websites accessible. For government, it's actually governed by the National Transition Strategy, which required for all government sites to be compliant and to a level of AA. So within the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, there's 3 levels of accessibility: A, AA, and AAA. And that level AA is very much the benchmark or the standard for majority of websites around the world. AAA is a very accessible website, which also tends to make it a little bit inaccessible in many respects. But the National Transition Strategy is what governs government websites. The Disability Discrimination Act governs all other websites, and that requirement was for all commercial websites to be compliant by the end of 2013. So all websites that are not compliant currently contravene that Disability Discrimination Act and can be taken to court if there's a complaint made. So that's the stick approach. So understanding WCAG. Has anyone actually come across the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines in their work? In any? Yep. Have you had to read it? It's kind of invokes narcolepsy, I think. It's a really look. WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, took about 10 years to create. So there was a version 1 and then a version 2, and version 2 took 10 years after version 1. And it's not surprising because there are people from all around the world that contribute to a community around web standards, and lots of very knowledgeable people in web accessibility, but it's hard to make some standards that are technology agnostic in this day and age. So WCAG is made up of a set of 4 principles. So it's making things perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. They're called POUR, P-O-U-R. And underneath the principles are a set of 12 guidelines. So this just demonstrates here the principles at the top, so something that's being perceivable, the guideline being 1.2 time-based media. The success criteria for that guideline is 1.2.1, audio only and video only for pre-recorded video. And essentially, there's also then a set of techniques for each of those success criteria. So this success criteria is around providing an alternative for time-based media for audio-only content. What essentially that's saying is that you need to provide captions on your video. So that's how the standard is broken down. It's a very technical, I wouldn't say jargonistic, but a very technical set of guidelines. Most developers that have come across, or web designers that have come across, that have had to read it for their work, or for in projects that they've been working on, have said that it's taken them about a month to read it and understand it. So it doesn't necessarily provide you with the how, but it provides you with a set of guidelines for how to make a website accessible. So the techniques for how to caption a video, for example, are not what that information isn't provided inside the standard itself. So what we've endeavoured to do via our Access IQ website is try to provide practical resources on the how. How do you create captions for a video? And on that, what you do is you use auto captions on YouTube, and then you go in and edit them. So this is just some statistics on web accessibility and who will be provided. I've neglected to sort of tell you at the beginning of the presentation that in Australia, according to the census, or according to the ABS anyway, about 1 in 5 Australians have a disability. Now, if you do the census, I don't know how many of you have older parents, but my mum and my dad are in their late 60s. They live in Melbourne, so I call them on the phone all the time. My mum is really, really deaf, and but she won't admit it. So she doesn't consider herself as having a disability. Yet, and she's also has macular degeneration partial macular degeneration. So, she uses an iPad, but she has to really blow things up and zoom in on things. But she doesn't consider herself as being one of those 1 in 5. So, really, with an ageing population, I think that those stats are will be increased greatly over the next 15 or so years. So on that, in your work, if you're working for organisations and digital agencies, the reality, is that your customers are growing older. So in the next 15 years, the number of people over the age of 65 is projected to double, and I think every week there's about 6,700 Australians that turn 65, which is an enormous number of people. And those people, baby boomers, are online, so of the younger baby boomers, there's about 80% that are online and using the web, and 75% of that are older age group. And in fact, I went to a meeting with a large financial institution today, and they are rebuilding a tablet app. They're rebuilding the tablet app for the 55 to 60 or 75 age group, because they recognise that, from the analytics tell them, and their focus groups tell them that it's that age group that are using their tablet the most for banking. They're not going to a desktop and they're not using a mobile, they're using a tablet. So they're rebuilding their app for that particular age group. They've got incredible purchasing power, they spend a lot of time online, but they also, if they're watching television, use a secondary device, they spend a lot of money too. So in terms of, I've talked about all the background and the reasons why, so in terms of how do you get accessibility into your organisation, what can you do? So, I mean, some of this is easy, some of it's hard. It can be quite difficult to get top-level buy-in to accessibility and increase accessibility awareness within your organisation. I do, of course, encourage education and education tailored to an individual's role. So as a web developer or as a user experience designer, your education around accessibility is going to be different to someone who's creating content or a business analyst or a tester. This is just to give you an indication that accessibility is everyone's role in an organisation. So from the senior management down, senior managers have overall accountability for accessibility, but even in the finance department, they may be responsible for procurement, so making sure that any third-party software or content that is procured for websites is accessible is important. If that's what you do in your work, you're perfectly within your right to demand it or to request it and say, well, I want the service that you're delivering to me to be accessible and compliant with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Legal are always interested in reducing their exposure to risk. So they'll often be conducting risk assessments and creating contracts that have web accessibility included in them. Within the marketing area, accessibility is increasingly an important part of their remit or role. Creating accessible content, accessible design, trickles all the way down into communications and the content team. But also, once you move over to more the technical side of things, this is the IT and communication, so web tech policy, product standards and accessibility statements in products, for project managers managing accessibility practically, and then trickling down to developers, testers, designers, and the role that accessibility plays in each of those areas. If you're lucky enough in large organisations, there is sometimes also an accessibility evangelist or a person who has some level of responsibility for accessibility. So what can you do? You can take responsibility for what you do, and this here, whilst it's not very sexy, it is a way in which I've broken down that guideline that we looked at before, 1.2, which is time-based media, into a table where you can actually identify who's responsible for the delivery of that. Now, so for pre-recorded audio and video. So the recommendation is for non-live web-based audio, such as podcasts, to provide descriptive text transcript that includes relevant visual and auditory information. So the responsibility for that sits with the content team or content producer, but sometimes it also sits with the client. So if they provide you with the podcast, you can ask them to provide the text transcript. Then down the bottom here, in terms of the delivery of captions, there may be a developer responsibility for the provision of that, because you've got to deliver the video on an accessible media player, and there are free accessible media players available. Vision Australia has a really good version of an accessible media player using YouTube. So you can very easily place that into your website. So there's a responsibility for developers, but also within the content team by creating captions using YouTube and then going in and editing those. My recommendation is to tackle what I call low-hanging fruit. So focus on the changes that fix issues across a website that are common. So looking at cascading style sheets, your template that's being used. You can really, really quickly look at issues like colour contrast. So colour contrast in a template, alternative text that might appear in images of that template, heading structure within the CSS, of course captioning for videos, but any labels on form fields, especially the search box. Everyone seems to forget that one. So with web development, what we recommend, the best approach anyway, is to bake it in from the start. So if you're starting on a new project, that's the best time to bake in accessibility. It's going to be costly and difficult to make a website or a mobile app accessible. If you get to the end and then you do your user testing and you do your accessibility testing and you find it is fundamentally flawed, you have to then go back and retrofit everything. So in this day and age with, do many of you use like an agile methodology for development? It's actually really easy to bake in accessibility in an agile environment. So with each sprint, allow some time once the sprint is has left the station, whatever you use your terminology, to then build in an accessibility check at that point in time. It's really quick to do. Someone with some good expertise, and you can always train up someone within your team to be an accessibility lead who does an accessibility check once the sprint's finished, the train's left the station. 24 hours later you can have information about the accessibility of what you've delivered, and then within the next sprint you then bake it in. You just put it back into any of the learnings back into the development process, and it's all baked into that process. It doesn't have to be difficult.
Sorry, to that, I would recommend that anyone following an agile approach of developing products on the web or even on phones or whatever should include accessibility in the definition of done, in their agile definition of done, so that you don't even get to the point of reviewing at the end of the sprint. Your task as a developer is not done unless you're actually making sure that it's coded with accessibility best practice in mind.
Absolutely, and somewhat depending on the size of the team, it's not always able to educate everybody around accessibility. So ultimately, that's exactly where we want to get to, is where the definition of done includes not only the functional elements of what was included in that sprint, but the accessibility of that as well. In larger teams, that can be quite difficult. And if that's the case, what we recommend, a really practical way of going about it, is to have someone within each Scrum team who has who is an accessibility champion or has some level of accessibility knowledge, and they can just do those quick easy checks of checking the colour contrast, checking alternative text, form labels, the basic thing from the previous slide. So I think there's about 12 things that you should check altogether, and they can be done really, really quickly. So like I said, accessibility checks are those key milestones. We also recommend user testing with disabilities across all devices. So I know it sounds really, really odd, but you can create a compliant website but still not be accessible to users. So people build, we've seen it happen many times where people build a website to standards, but they haven't taken the usability into consideration. So actually conducting some user testing with people with a disability, you can actually see how they use a screen reader, or how they might navigate a site if they've got arthritis and they need bigger buttons, or they zoom it up, or that provides a really effective way of making a website truly accessible. And yeah, remediation after go live can be really costly, so I also recommend that your suppliers and procurement are also on board as well. Form a plan of action, and this is probably a little bit broader than you and your role within an organisation, but a pro-accessibility culture in all product and service development, trying to establish that is important. Having an accessibility policy or statement, disability action plan, and lodging that with the Australian Human Rights Commission cements an organisation's role in, or their commitment around accessibility, and then of course you've got to manage that actively. So accessibility is a bit of a journey. What do you need? You need money, you need time, you need patience, and then maybe a bit more money. It's not that accessibility is expensive, but I actually think it's the true cost of development. So making something accessible is not necessarily an additional cost, it's actually the true cost of creating an accessible website. And then finally, if you need to talk, CD about anything, and then Jeff is just returned from the toilets.
Talk to me.
So,
I have, yeah.
So one of the things that I encourage you to access both the Media Access website, but also Access IQ, which is accessiq.org. There's lots of free information on how to make elements of a website accessible. So some of our most popular content is how to make a carousel accessible, how to make infographics accessible, ARIA, using ARIA landmarks in websites, online captioning, simple things like that. We do have a couple of practical guides on the site that are actually role-based. So one's dedicated to developers, another's dedicated to designers and content producers. And then the other thing, if I could just give indulge in a plug, we also deliver a university-backed an accredited course. So we partner with the University of South Australia to deliver a course in web accessibility compliance. It's online, it goes for 6 weeks, and it basically teaches all you need to know about WCAG. So you go through all different elements, you learn how to test a website, and all about the WCAG guidelines. So I think we've got some information
In a
about
little
that.
bag, and we'll put it up front. Put a branded free USB, like you never needed another one of those.
If you work in an agency or you work in an organisation and you are responsible, you think you need to be responsible for web accessibility, then I encourage you to go to your employer and tell them about the course, or tell them about the website, and just look at using some of the resources, the free resources that are there, or the course. There is a cost for the course. It's a really good way to ensure that...
If you're interested in the course, this brochure talks about that.
But if you wanted, say, some people with disabilities to test your website?
Well, we can help you with that as well. I can either supply or put in contact with you. We do encourage you to pay for those services rather than be for free. Most of these people with a disability, it's their own form of employment, so and they're generally very, very knowledgeable in the types of devices and technologies that they use. So we also tend to video them and then using a website. So we're kind of like the person over the shoulder, recording what they're doing, and they're often saying, "I can't do this, I can't access this button," and we do an interview with them afterwards, which is quite an interesting insight from the organisations, and then they tend to use that information or use those videos for induction and training for team members. So
I just have a hobby website that seems to have a fair bit of traffic for people with disabilities, particularly the older people.
okay. You can always crowdsource people. I mean, it's amazing. People with a disability, like we work with a lot of people, and a lot of them say, you know what, I don't want to be the person who complains about a website because all I want to do is order my pizza online. So if I can't do it online, I'm going to go to another site. But if someone's listening, they're more than happy to tell you problems that they're occurring. So if it's going to make it better, then people are generally very happy to help. So even if you put a call out on Twitter or crowdsource through various organisations like Blind Citizens Australia or Vision Australia, there might be people who'd be happy to provide you with feedback.
Is your organisation accessiq.org or .org.au?
accessiq.org.
There was a big announcement over the last sort of month or so with Google material design as a user interface, sort of methodology, I suppose, and they've implemented that in a lot of their new native apps across Android and iOS. Do you know if there's any sort of systematic involvement by the sort of accessibility community in these big things like that? Because I noticed as soon as I saw it, I thought it was beautiful and it looked easy to use for a sighted person, but some really obvious things meant a screen reader just wouldn't, apart from the fact that it's a native app, a screen reader wouldn't pick it up, because it's always got like the add button beneath things on the bottom, so you had to read the whole screen before it got to the most commonly used function, for example.
Yeah, right.
Stuff like that. I'm just wondering if you knew of it? Or?
Look, I'm not entirely familiar with what's happening in Google. I do know they have their own accessibility team, and they have several accessibility teams that work on different products for them. Things like the area that I know most about is obviously around the captioning. So their auto captions, they always say, there's a guy who I know in the US who works on the Google sort of auto captions, and every time I speak to him, it's always, I bet a product's 5 years away.
Right.
It's always constantly 5 years away. But I guess to answer your question, they do have particular accessibility teams that work on interfaces, but I don't know what it is, and I think I can only imagine that sometimes they don't bake it into their products because they'll release something, a new version of something, and it won't be accessible, much like Apple and I think their version 8 of their software. There were a lot of colour contrast issues for low vision people because they moved away from, I think, was it blue and white to grey and white? Yeah, I don't know.
No, thanks. Yeah, that's didn't want to keep everyone from pizza.
Are there any other questions?
I have it's more like about content strategy, because these days, we can filter different content for different devices and mobile, tablets, or whatever you're doing. And if there are any recommendation you tell us about content strategy, because like accessibility, trying to provide the same experience in the browser using the same device, which is sometimes if you have a content strategy in our side.
Yeah.
So
Look, we absolutely, and content is one of the primary issues. So because it's the most dynamic thing on a website or an app, what I recommend is that content should be created accessibly at the source. So if that is a Word document, then that Word document should be created accessibly, and invariably most content these days, even if it is created in a Word document, is destined for the web. So regardless of what format, whether it ends up in a PDF document or it goes into an InDesign document that then becomes a PDF document, or it goes directly into a content management system, invariably it will be perhaps a Word document at its source. So we recommend, and we recommend that content is created accessibly at its source, and that there are key things that you can do to make that content accessible by creating proper heading structure. So making sure there's a heading 1, but then nested down from there, heading 2 levels, heading 3, heading 4, and so forth. Alternative text for images, tables. You don't merge, don't use tables for layout, and you don't merge rows and table cells. And that there's always a header row. So whatever you create, it's funny because a Word document, if you actually use the styles in a Word document, you'll create an accessible document. And if you then convert that document to a PDF, 99% of the time it'll be an accessible PDF document. And then if you copy and paste that information into a content management system, it should retain, not always, depends on the content management system, but should retain a lot of its accessibility. So by understanding the principles of a Word document or a PDF, you can create accessible content. There's a few different areas or issues when it comes to social media. So there are things that you can do around creating content accessibly for Twitter, for example. So there's some formatting in messages that won't make it accessible to a blind vision impaired user. But there's lots of things that you can do to develop a very simple content strategy that ensures content, when it's created at its source, is accessible, and then that flows through to other media.
Do you find in your experience that those many companies claim to support, like A2AA and all that sort of stuff, and more and more these days people are doing ARIA roles, but then they're just kind of like hitting a limit, and not actually then implementing the more difficult aspects of the ARIA spec, like the various design patterns for keyboard navigation and stuff like that. Did you find that's pretty common across the board? Certainly in my experience, I'm finding a lot of people don't even know that these keyboard navigation design patterns exist.
Yeah, I think a lot of I call it WAI ARIA, as in WAI, ARIA, and things like the landmarks, and it's still yet to be really adopted by a lot of developers. And it's only if they have really an awareness about accessibility that if it is adopted. So there is quite a long way to go before those conventions are adopted by developers across the board.
And the other thing is, the complaint I hear sometimes is that the contrast ratios and the level at which you have to apply them based on whether it's AA or AAA and all that sort of stuff, and the size of the text, make it very difficult to create pretty websites and products.
I don't know, because Because, well, to give you a very quick example, so when we created Access IQ, we actually were a bit of a guinea pig because we wanted to bust that myth, so to speak. And so with Access IQ, we actually have 8 logo colours, and we chose all different, you know, like a lime green, we've got yellow, the light blue, red, and when the branding agency or whatever came back to us and were like, oh wow, that's really funky, we very quickly realised that I think only one of those colours actually passed all the levels of colour contrast. So we thought, no, we're going to keep the logos, we want to keep the logo colours, but how can we create an accessible colour palette? So one of the case studies on the Access IQ site is, and it's a very popular article, is, I forgot the name of it.
It's accessibility begins with branding.
Yeah, that's it. Accessibility begins with your branding, and what it tells the story of how we had to go through creating an accessible colour palette out of these eight logo colours. So what I don't know if you realise, but under the guidelines, a logo is exempt from colour contrast. It's not best practice, of course, but you don't actually have to make, you can still use, your greys with your white background and things like that, your light mauves. But from there, what we recommend is you choose colours that have much better colour contrast to then make sure that your headings and your text and other attributes on the website do have effective colour contrast. So you can actually create an accessible colour palette for a website.
We should harass you individually and anything, sorry.
Yeah, I think that's great. Well, a final question?
Yeah, if I can. So we've got all these wonderful rules for making accessible stuff in the digital space. Is there stuff that applies to the physical space, so print media? They just seem to do whatever they want.
Yeah, look, there is, and also in the physical space in terms of buildings too. And in actual fact, that stuff is actually much more visible to the eye. Like, I did actually have a slide in the presentation which I took out, which was around curb cuts, in the curb. So that was originally put in place for obviously people in wheelchairs, but it serves a greater purpose. So even things like what I noticed in the lift here, they didn't have was some lifts will tell you what floor you're on when you get out. I don't know if it does it here.
No, it tells you as you're moving.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So, and you'll see some lifts these days have braille on the inside so people know what floor they're pressing. And the other thing, there's obviously ramps going into buildings these days. And the other thing that I've occurred in some buildings is that when you get to a junction where there's corridors, there'll be like a mat or something. The carpet will change and become like a wooden floor or something, and that tells a blind person that they've reached a junction and they've got a decision on where they're going from. Cool. So there's lots of stuff in the physical space and the printed space, but the digital space, of course, is a little bit more tricky.
Cool, thank you.
Any more questions?
Pizza.
Pizza. Yeah, please eat. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
So much.
So apparently we almost each get one entire pizza.
Wow.
Hello. You're brave.
So much pizza.
I'm down with that.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot.
Oh wow, they weren't kidding.
But it's pretty sure to attack it.
Fuck you, no you, fuck you. You didn't come here for nothing, did you? I know that's what you were saying.
Yeah, and now the point is to work back to the building.
Bit of profanity.
You can absolutely create
If you can't be bothered making your website accessible, put on this MP3.
or diamond is built into whether that be just simple drop-down menus or Ajax-based, whatever's to.
Right.
Keep it on.
Yeah, that was last one was the market response when told that they had to be compliant with accessibility legislation of '92.
Surprising attitude of our calls, isn't it?
Just for one field or one small little segment. 5% of the money.
We don't even find you. Who cares what it looks like? That's what.
That's some guy who's responsible for the funding.
And then people started doing
You go really well with a cigarette. I'm pretty sure I'm the only person.
One of the things that I like is that somebody pointed out to me is that search engines are deaf and blind. They're still deaf and blind. Yeah. So it doesn't matter how pretty it is. That's really
well. I mean, if they can auto catch itself.
There's another video.
I've read the link.
It's early days. Well, it's not
Yeah.
No one's talking about it.
Hot.
First time we've tried these.
I don't know. Is that chili? Just so hungry, probably.
Screen reader mode tomorrow just to get a bit of empathy. Not horrible. It's terrible. We've got one senior guy.
Yeah.
And you've got a week
That's interesting. I don't think
You work with this work like this.
There'll be a lecture on, there'll be a lecture. And then they're pointed to the wiki. You get out of the world, it's like, oh my god, I got to read that.
Well, they just released
Oh, it's very
It's really narcoleptic. We've never been asked for an accessible interface.
Yeah, look.
If anything, we put a black contrast screen because developers like black.
Not necessarily a provide, superior grade specs.
I mean, my sister.
My dad actually some client to visit next one.
Next one.
If you're going to be doing
I'll have to look it up.
So Melissa learned sign language.
Oh well. Sounds good. You only live once. Ironically, because people who bring Sanskrit, they drink just 12 years ago. YOLO 12 years ago. Before YOLO was YOLO. No toast for goats, United Nations to basically redefine their definition
You know, I'm really fucking in class.
I'll bring your name tag, but I can't.
What is it? Hawaiian. Hawaiian.
I just want to talk to the person who first thought about putting pineapple on the pizza.
Very good. I've learned that a friend once I went to the on board.
There's plenty of these where did this idea come from?
Australian sustainability and that one's like
I think we've got the basic.
Yeah, actually you're right.
They're going on the same kind of cycle.
The other one has a lot of things
Doing it.
to pull, but
The underlings, inverted commas,
like someone to chat with.
It's not very
Go directly to them.
it's not really yeah, links, opinions,
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah, the other one was out of Adelaide. You know, it's like perception.
Is a,
Probably 30 features as well.
How truly
it would be fun.
Oh yeah, actually I saw that.
Look at the Ministry and also Saudi Arabia has to start reviewing grassroots. It's sort of gender-based violence. You can look at it as an example of
I'm taking dissatisfaction from usually not only essentially retail outlets, but essentially like where there's 3 or 4 floors of people processing waste
There's 2 buildings where pretty much
and all that other stuff losing out.
I'm
going to try your part.
Yeah, we could do
one public
We should
like
give one hour. I didn't make it today. Yesterday.
You know the test chart?
Yeah. I tried to.
actually have it.
I used to fight crowds at
What are you trying to help?
Is it a good tip?
Yeah. It took us 3 years to get some Microsoft Photo Essentials.
It's pumping now. It's pumping now.
I do mainly web.